Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man behind the Sword Illumination, and going on adventures with me every month, good brother Monarch.
So I've been making it a point to go back and replay a series of games called Luminous Arc, and I'm frustrated because they weren't quite popular enough to have fan translations to show me how much of the nonsense in that script was localizers changing stuff, because that reads a lot like localizers changing stuff in the script of that game. But I can't prove it, and that irritates me.
I hope you managed to clip that so maybe we can bully more localizers, because that is always a moral good. Well, bully localizers when it comes to anime. When it comes to fan localization, I'm not going to bully that.
I don't know, I remember the days when you saw fan translations of Final Fantasy IV that just threw in so many swear words for absolutely no reason. Maybe bully them a little bit.
We hold these truths to be self-evident that all are cremated equal. But what we're going into is going to be a bit of a first for the monastery. So a lot of times when we've done these Valley of the Judged, it's been on core books, things that are very self-contained. This is going to be a special exception to that rule. As you can see on the screen, the subject matter is Titan Effect, a game that I have a lengthy history with, and with its creator, Christian Nome. He was one of my earliest interviews 5 years ago. I've talked with him since on things like the Big Dice panel, which I really should bring back if I can find the right angle. I haven't done that in a few years. I've had him. I've gotten a look at the Year Zero version that's on the way, and I may or may not have had a hand in nudging Nome in that direction, because he was looking at adapting Titan Effect into other systems. Some people, he was thinking about doing D&D at one point, and I was like, don't. I think one of the D20 systems was brought up, and I'm like, no, that is a bad idea. You'd be giving yourself more work than you need. I'm not going to say that I'm solely responsible for it, but I'll take the W for at least nudging him in the direction of other systems. Especially since and I have word of God on this, Titan Effect started out as his own Mutants and Masterminds campaign before expanding outward. And as much as I like Mutants and Masterminds, it has its own issues. Ones that are common when it comes to trying to do power-based supers games. Look, I don't hate superhero games, but the reason they don't show up as often on this show is the sheer fact that there's a higher floor.
Basically be reading the powers.
Yeah. We'd be about 2/3 of the season would be us reading powers, and that's not fun for us or for you guys. Now, the summarization of Titan Effect is X-Men meets Metal Gear Solid. Psychic super spies up against animal-human hybrid mutants. With the different factions involved. Now, because of the fact that this is technically a Savage Worlds campaign setting and not a standalone RPG, technically, this does mean that we had to do a bit of cross-referencing, and this is where I had to show my hand, because I have more experience with Savage Worlds than Monarch does.
My experience is I'm aware it exists. And there's something called Bennies.
Yeah,
unless I'm mixing that up with a different system.
No, you got it right.
And I hate that word, just for the record.
What, you don't like Benny and the Jet?
as a song, Benny and the Jets are great, but Benny's as a standalone word, I hate it, and I can't really explain to you why.
Is that like how people hate the word moist?
Moist? Yep. Just Benny's. It does something to my brain.
Yeah. Now, some may ask, why is it called Declassified Edition? Well, this was a case of unfortunate timing. Because just shortly after, I think maybe in the span of a few months, of the original Titan Effect core book launching, Savage Worlds Adventure Edition came out. And that produced a few changes and meant that the original version, which was meant to be using Explorers Edition, which was the previous edition of Savage Worlds, there were some compatibility issues. There was a conversion guide that was made rather quickly, and then eventually we have a bit of a catch up with Savage World Adventure Edition, what has been known as SWADE. And while this does require the Adventure Edition core book and the Sewer Powers Companion for use, the Sewer Powers Companion is mostly just building off of the power system. We won't need to go into the Sewer Power system, but we will have to go into the SWADE core book briefly throughout some parts of this particular series. Like I said, this is new territory for the Valley of the Judged.
I don't suspect we're going to have to be jumping back and forth too often.
No. And I do know that that Christian wants to make some sort of animation out of this. I've seen some of the test stuff. Because, well, I'm on his Discord, so there's that. But it opens up. But after going into the table of contents, which I will note two things that this game is doing that I like. We have an index, we have bookmarks, and we have hyperlinks. And in fact, the hyperlinks have a little spot at the top that you're going to be seeing later, so that you could quickly navigate as if you were using some futuristic-ass data pad.
Hallelujah.
But starting with the comic that I covered last time when I talked about the quick start for the Year Zero variant, which is still in development. But I definitely appreciate
it is a very well drawn comic. I will give it that.
Mm-hmm. Then we have...
I haven't read it, but we won't be doing that here.
Yeah, but then we have Welcome to SpearNet. And you have that little button to access. You can kind of see what I mean when I say that this would work very well on a tablet. But then we get into the overview. Titan Effect RPG Declassified Edition is the latest edition of the tactical espionage and sci-fi setting powered by Savage Worlds. It takes place in a contemporary world where spies gifted with psychic powers clash with genetically enhanced soldiers in a secret war where the future of human evolution is at stake. Players play trained operatives gifted with psychic abilities working for the international clandestine organization known as the Spear. They carry out perilous missions worldwide, fight against vicious creatures, and battle insidious organizations. Some are there to make a difference, others to taste adventure, while some have no place to go. And I do like that there's this sidebar about alternate rules for those who don't have the Superpowers Companion. I mean, it's highly advised that you use it in conjunction with this, but if you don't have it, there's a gimme.
I do also like it does tell you like, hey, this is kind of here under the assumption you have access to these other things.
Mm-hmm. But then we have Welcome to the Spear. and I will let you take that part.
So welcome aboard, Operative. You have completed your training and aptitude tests. You are now a full member of the Special Executive Assault and Recon, or what everyone calls the Spear. You and your fellow operatives have the arduous task of protecting the world from biological and paranormal threats, but you are not alone. So what is the Spear? The Spear is a clandestine organization, independent and with no affiliation whatsoever. The Spear operates at an international level to prevent the world from falling into chaos. Its existence, however, is unknown to all but a few individuals and organizations. British intelligence created Spear to counter the Nazis in their psychic research program during World War II. Composed of psychic soldiers and spies, the organization proved to be a vital asset in the fight against the Axis forces before being disbanded after the war. Seeing their mission was not finished, with the arrival of the Cold War and new threats, the surviving members reformed the Spear into an independent international task force. The main objective is to track and neutralize eugenics and psychic threats without taking sides. However, the world is changing at an alarming rate, and the Spear has to face new threats each day. So, we've got just their basic priorities are ensure the organization's secrecy, monitor individuals and organizations suspected of using eugenics or psychic abilities for illegal activities, preempt and combat eugenics and psychic threats, recruit new potential agents, search and secure psychics from malicious hands. The one big thing I like about having the priority list here, it immediately establishes this is the kind of game you're playing. It's not like just a run and gun type thing. I'm going to compare it to a completely unrelated game and how I can compare it to something like Vampire the Masquerade, where you get that beginning set is like, look, these rules are here for this style of game.
I do find it interesting that as time has gone on, we've been seeing more and more in that direction of games that are laser focused on a particular style. And even though Savage Worlds is, technically speaking, a universalist RPG, it very much skews towards certain styles, certain vibes. The more pulpy kind of affairs. Which, given that one of my earliest introductions to Savage Worlds was the Savage World of Solomon Kane, and then later on through things like Deadlands Reloaded. I mean, I'd played the original Deadlands, but not all that much compared to Reloaded. But the fact of the matter is, it has a particular direction. And it's even better when you have a inbuilt assumption about what your character is going to be, instead of the, oh, you can be just about anybody, which is nice for people who have experience, but some people need a bit of a nudge.
Indeed. And I do like, specifically why I like this so much, is you do have some games we've seen where it's not really clear about the assumptions that you should be making going into the game. And that's going to kind of skew how people look at it. If you want to have a focused game, you need to kind of make that clear in your description, which they do very well here.
Yeah. Then we have cosmology, which is mainly going into psychics and BAS, or bio-augmented soldiers. Those are going to be the two primary archetypes you see throughout this. And most Spear agents are going to be psychics. At least most Spear field agents. Obviously, support agents aren't going to be psychics. Or are they? And then we get into a bit of the factions. We have the Olympians, which are more about diving headfirst into the BAS programs, Uh, one of the big rivals to Spear. Then we have Ares, which is an arms setup. We have the Directorate, which wants to make a psychic-dominated world. We have the terrorist organization Typhon, which are terrorists that even Ares and the Olympians don't care for. We have the Order of the Holy Mystery, which is, of course, hidden within the Roman Catholic Church and wants to eliminate both BAS and psychics. And although they will take religious-minded psychics, but they won't take BASs. And there are other factions as well. And right after that, we have a neat little glossary that kind of reminds me of the lexicons you'd see in something like a White Wolf game.
This is something I don't think we've seen crop up nearly often enough in some of these books. Just like, bam, here's a page early on that tells you a description of all the important words you're going to need to know for this setting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why this isn't in more books, but I'm really happy whenever we've seen it.
Well, with some books, they want to play halfsies about whether or not they even have a setting, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But here's another thing that is vastly important, especially when you're dealing with a specific setting, and that is having your inspiration so that people can know what the study material is going to be to get the same vibe. And we even have its. This is another thing that we see in White Wolf and a few other games, but it's always nice to have, because it's basically saying this was kind of the inspiration for how I built the game this way. So you can look at this and get ideas from it to kind of get the vibe to keep things consistent. So with, say, anime and television, we have things like Be the Beginning, Black Lagoon, Dark Angel, Darker Than Black, Standalone Complex, and Witch Hunter Robin. I think you can kind of get the vibe of things just from that list. I think the only thing on that I haven't seen is Dark Angel, and that's because it kept getting screwed out of its time slot. Again. Don't know why that kept happening to Whedon. No, it wasn't Whedon, but just a lot of people get screwed out of time slots like that with Fox. Then again, if I listed off all the things that Fox screwed up over the years, I could do a 4-year class. But with comic books, we have Akira, Checkmate, Elephant Men, Hellboy, and subsequently the BPRD series, Queen and Country, Spriggan, and X-Men. A few of these I haven't read. I haven't read Elephant Man. I'll probably need to fix that at some point. Queen and Country I have read, and I'm very familiar with Greg Rucka. He's a natural fit when it comes to doing spy works. Which is why it was odd when he got saddled with doing Wonder Woman.
Look, you're always going to end up with someone with just some weird-ass things on their record that you wonder how that ended up there.
Mm-hmm. But we have a similar list when it comes to fiction, when it comes to non-fiction entries. When it comes to movies, we've got some obvious ones and some ones that I approve of. I do find it interesting that it went with the Bourne Identity. When of the Bourne movies, I think the Bourne Supremacy is probably the best of the three.
I've still not seen any of the Bournes.
Mm-hmm.
They're on my list of stuff to eventually get to.
I think it was either Supremacy or Ultimatum. Basically the second one, because you know how it is with trilogies. Oftentimes the second movie is the best.
Yeah.
obviously with TTRPGs, there's some obvious ones to go into. Interface Zero is another Savage Worlds setting that is far more cyberpunk. But even though it's listing cyberpunk games, this is not going to be a cyberpunk setting, obviously. And then on video games, we have stuff like Resident Evil, Stalker, Splinter Cell, Deus Ex, Metal Gear Solid, and Alpha Protocol. It's funny that Alpha Protocol has become one of the most beloved jank games, probably because it was scratching an itch people didn't know they had.
Yeah. It's a game that, like, I was very familiar with it at release. I didn't play it, but a lot of people just kind of said, okay, the game's not good. It did not come out well, but there's a good idea here. There's a good core that pretty much everyone appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they couldn't really bring themselves to like or recommend the game.
I think one of the things that I will point out that people seem to really consistently like is how it handled its conversation systems. In particular, the fact that you've got a timer and you have to go on a gut feeling. Granted, some of the responses are kind of weird, like Suave feels like a teenager trying to be Bond.
To be fair, that's less the system's fault than more. Maybe they just needed to revise the script a little bit.
But
even if the system itself is fine.
Considering how many branches of the script to the point that the plot tree looks like a tumbleweed, or just one scene, I can understand why it didn't get refined. Because if you want the best breakdown on everything that went right and wrong with Alpha Protocol, I always highly recommend Racevic's video on it. It's a lengthy one, but he goes into quite a bit of detail. And how, well, even Obsidian will admit that they kind of bit off more than they could chew with that project. But then we get into this nice little thing of the operative database, which, again, I enjoy how in-universe this is trying to be. And this is where we're going to be handling character creation. And it's at this point that we kind of need to make a bit of a diversion into the Suede rulebook. Specifically, the character creation summary. Normally we don't do this, but because of the fact that these steps aren't given in the core book of Titan Effect, because it's a campaign setting, we kind of have to bring it up here. Since you had suggested just going over the character creation summary, I'll let you do that.
Yep. So, first you'll start with picking a concept. Now, there is a nice list of concepts. This doesn't seem to, like, actually give an advantage or disadvantages.
No.
It's just kind of a list of ideas to help guide you along.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of starting with the concept, and you get a lot of good ones in our Titan Effect book. Then we get race. Not going to be relevant in Titan Effect if I remember correctly. We'll get to that in a bit, but then we go for hindrances. You take hindrances, you can raise the die type or choose an edge, or raise one of your attributes dies or choose an edge by taking 2 hindrances. Or 1 hindrance, you can gain a skill point or additional starting funds. Now, you are a bit more familiar with hindrances.
Hindrances are essentially disadvantages.
Yeah.
If you're doing the traits and flaws thing in Pathfinder, this would be the flaws.
But then we get to attributes then.
Mm-hmm.
Attributes start at D4. You have 5 points to distribute. Each step costs 1 point. Attributes may not be raised beyond D12 unless your hero's racial bonus states otherwise. That bit probably not going to be relevant.
Mm-hmm. And
skill.
This is probably obvious by now, but for everyone watching, I should hammer this home. Most of the stats when it comes to Savage Worlds that you're going to be using are based on die sizes. There's a few that aren't, but those are the rare exception. So the approach when you're doing the core die rolling is rolling your attribute die, your skill die, if applicable, and adding them together. You're looking for raises, so every 4 points is considered a raise. So that's kind of the general rule of how things are going to work.
Then we get skills, which include athletics, common knowledge, notice, persuasion, and stealth are core skills, and start at D4 for free. You have 12 points to put into these or any other skills, and each die type costs 1.2 and equal to the linked attribute, then 2 points per step after that. Derived statistics. Standard pace is 6 foot, but may be changed by racial abilities, edges, or hindrances. Parry, 2 plus half of fighting. Toughness, 2 plus half of vigor, plus any armor. Note that armor in parentheses like this, toughness, 11, parentheses 2. This means 2 points of the total 11 comes from an armor. An armor-piercing attack could bypass those 2, but not the other 9. Edges. Use any leftover hindrance points to take edges if you'd like, and each edge costs 2 hindrance points. Edges, I imagine, would be the advantages.
Yes.
To the hindrances. Right. And gear. Purchase up to $500 worth of equipment. I'm sure that is going to be different.
We'll get to that.
Effect. Yes.
So, moving into character creation within Titan Effect proper, players in Titan Effect play operatives or agents who work for the Spear. They come from different ethnicities, nationalities, and backgrounds. The operatives are part of the tactical response teams and are grouped by teams of 3 to 6 agents working for one of the Spear's units around the world. They specialize in different fields like counterterrorism, espionage, exfiltration, infiltration, investigation, reconnaissance, sabotage, target elimination, etc. Then we get into concepts. So we have Demolition Expert. What makes me a good demo man? I can't do Scottish like Zan does. I'm not even gonna try, but basically, yeah, the demo man, the guy who's good at blowing stuff up. Then field investigators. These are, the people who are going to be looking at clues in the field, your detectives and the like. Infiltration specialists. Exactly what it sounds like. I know their nicknames is ghosts or ninjas, but you don't need to be in a black bodysuit in order to be an infiltration specialist. Sometimes you're just there, but nobody notices you. Literally hiding in plain sight. And in other cases, you were there, but you were in one of those 30-second disguises. But then we have intelligence specialist, a spy, experts in intelligence and counterintelligence. Then we have medic. Everyone needs someone to patch them up. Operator. So these are the muscle. Your equivalent to a solo in Cyberpunk. Pilot, which which doesn't necessarily have to be an aircraft. They are your wheelman. Point man, which I guess is akin to the scout. They tend to be the first guys in. Psychic expert, self-explanatory. Sharpshooter, sneepers. Team leader, self-explanatory there. Tech expert, your hackers. And telepath, also self-explanatory. Now, then we get into creating an operative, starting with race. As mentioned before, race is not going to be as much of a factor. Only humans are allowed in Titan Effect. By default, all operatives are psychics and begin with any edge of their choosing. They must meet its requirements as normal. They also get the superpowers edge, seeing new edges, we'll get to that later, for free and start with 10 power points. Your power points are basically what you're going to be using for the psychic abilities. If the Game Master allows it, you can also play a bio-augmented soldier, see BAS and Therianthropes. We're not going to be getting that for a while. But just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. But you can play as a non-psychic if you want, in which case you start with 2 free edges instead of 1, and you get 5 more equipment points per rank to compensate for the lack of superpowers. When it's referring to rank, this is another thing of Savage Worlds. There isn't really a leveling system, there's a rank system. And I'm going to bring up the character advancement part from the core book. You get a number of advances and then you go up ranks, going from novice to seasoned to veteran to heroic to legendary for each advances that you get. Whenever you get an advance, you can get a new edge, increase a skill, increase if it's equal or greater than its linked attribute by one die, increase 2 skills that are lower than their linked attributes, increase 1 attribute by 1. You can only take this once per rank. Permanently remove a minor hindrance or reduce a major hindrance to a minor. So those are things you can do with 1 advancement. And every total amounts of advancements you get, that's going to determine what your rank is. And as an aside, I do want to point out that I like the fact that there's a kind of dead rank rule when it comes to the whole attribute and skill relationship in Savage Worlds, where it's better to have more skills that are under an attribute than it is to have one that's over an attribute. When I say dead rank, I mostly mean it's more expensive to bump it past the attribute. So a lot of games with attribute skill systems don't really think about that kind of soft cap. Of course, it also runs the issue of making attribute increase more important, but unlike some games where attribute increases are very expensive, this one isn't as expensive. But then we have traits. Attributes work the exact same way as normal. Skills are working a little bit different. You have athletics, common knowledge, fighting, notice, shooting, and stealth as D4s. So a bit more of a baseline. You know, mostly to reflect the fact that you are, well, an operative, not just a rank and file. And you have 14 points to spend when it comes to your skills. Which, let me contrast that. Let me go back to character creation summary. Okay, so it's not that much of a difference, but you've got some additional starting skills, but you're starting with a bit more. The only time you can raise a skill above D12 is with superpowers. There are some skills that are not allowed. Faith, Occult Psionics, Spellcasting, and Weird Science. But then we'll get into go into languages. I'll let you take that. Monarch, you alive?
Oh yeah, I gotta scroll back to the right spot. I clicked one of the hyperlinks and it didn't have a good way to jump right back to where
Meanwhile,
I was.
I'm looking in the chat and I see Hydra saying, now I'm imagining being in a hot neon pink outfit, but still good enough to hide or at least not get noticed. If the dice gods are on your side, maybe, but you're gonna need to be rolling really well for that. And you know how it is with RN Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, this slowed down on me for some reason. There we go. Went back to normal. So, Titan Effect uses multiple language setting rule. See Setting Rules chapter. Your character starts with their native language at D8 and number of language equals to half of her smart die for free at D6. She can later learn more languages by spending an advance for each new language. Your character can also take the Linguist Edge and double the number of additional languages known. And then we get the secondary statistics, which include pace, how fast your character moves. He walks 6 feet in a round and can move an additional 1d6 if he runs. Write 6 on your character sheet besides the word pace. This is 6 inches on the tabletop. Every 6 inch there represents 2 yards in the real world. Parry is equal to 2 plus half your character's fighting, 2 if the character does not have fighting, which that seems like an odd note in parentheses since fighting is now a core skill for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly an artifact. Plus any bonuses for certain weapons. This is the target number to hit your hero in melee combat. For stats such as D12 plus 1, add half the fixed modifier rounded down. For instance, a fighting skill of D12 plus 1 grants a parry of 8, 2 plus half of D12, whereas a D12 plus 2 gives a parry of 9, 2 plus half of D12 plus 2. And toughness is your character operative's damage threshold. Anything over this causes her to be rattled or worse. Toughness is 2 plus half your opponent's vigor plus armor. Use the armor worn on his torso. Vigor over D12 is calculated just like parry. Edges and hindrances. See Savage Worlds core book.
Yeah, we'll be
Background.
getting to the new edges and hindrances later on in this series. Actually, we'll be getting into them sooner than that, I believe. In fact, let me double check something so I'm not talking out of my ass. Yeah, we will be getting into that tonight.
We won't be reading each individual one, obviously. We'll just cover a couple of them real quick to give you an idea of what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But then we get backgrounds. Each operator have a life and career before joining Spear. Choose your character's previous occupation, which grants them a +1 to common knowledge in their area of expertise or interests. Example, an operative with the law enforcer background will get a +1 to common knowledge regarding police and FBI procedures during a hostage situation. This is not an all-encompassing list, but just some examples. Say a musician is an artist, a playboy dilettante, army, spy, cyber technician, anything running that gamut, really, that you can think of.
Yep. Now, gear is going to be a little bit different because it's not using a dollar standard. Operatives start with an encrypted smartphone, a subvocal comlink, a standard pistol, and 10 equipment points. Equipment points increase by 5 for each rank above novice. Equipment points basically determines the spread of equipment that you can load yourself out with before going out on the field. Think of it at...
So think your James Bond gets his look gear before things. You
Yeah.
pick it at the beginning, that's what you got for the mission.
And try to bring it back in one piece. Never in one piece. Like, how... Of all the stuff that Q gives Bond throughout the movies, how much of that actually comes back?
Sure, some of it shows back up.
Some of it, but not all that much.
Enough that Bond doesn't lose his job.
Then again, one of the first things in the first movie was him having to get bullied into using the Walter PPK instead of using a Beretta again.
For the record, Pierce Brosnan is underrated. One of the best Bonds.
Yeah. I know Connery is king when it comes to that, but I feel like a lot of people overlook Brosnan. I know somebody's gonna go, what about Dalton? Dalton got screwed over because they were trying to do a nicer Bond and it didn't work. The 80s were a rough time for Bond fans. I will phrase it like that anyway. But there are 2 new skills that are added in. Psi Phenomena. So the operative knows a lot about the history of psychics and everything linked to them. Secret societies, ancient traditions, the secret war, etc. They also know about psychic threats and how psychic powers work in general. This skill replaces occult. And Tradecraft. Tradecraft is a series of methods and techniques used in modern espionage, such as document forging, coded message creation, counter-surveillance, use of dead drops, interrogation techniques, etc. And we actually have a unified skill list of what skills you are going to have. Some of these have some asterisk, and the ones that are bolded are the ones that you start at D4 with. We do have a bit of an asterisk regarding language, saying every character starts with his native language skill at D8 and a number of languages equal to half his smart die for free at D6. A character can later learn more languages by spending a progression for each new language by taking the linguist edge. I appreciate that that's done because when you're dealing with spy fiction, there's kind of an inbuilt assumption that player characters are speaking multiple languages. Especially if, well, being in intelligence is part of your stock and trade. But then we have new hindrances, and there's a bunch that are taken off the list. Alien form, dependency, distinctive appearance, doubting Thomas, greedy, megalomaniac, monologuer, outsider, poverty, power negation, secret identity, transformation, vulnerability, and young. Some of those have an asterisk, which are noting that those are from the Sewer Powers Companion. And some of these are only available to BAS. Again, we'll get to that later. But new hindrances, we have amnesia, major or minor. Disgraced, which is a minor hindrance. New recruit, which is a minor hindrance. You're the rookie. Notoriety, a minor one. And puppet, minor or major. I.e., you've contracted a debt to an individual who manipulates you. Then when it comes to edges, there are a few that are off the table. Arcane background, arcane resistance, followers, giant killer, power edges, sidekick, weird edges, except danger sense and scavenger. Yeah, even though there's a lot of edges, and fortunately for me, they're all categorized. But as mentioned, Sewer Powers is the one edge that you need to have if you're going to be playing a psychic, and we have the categories of psychics: biokinesis, ESP, psychokinesis, and telepathy.
And just to reiterate, the default assumption is everyone's a psychic.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, you can take double gifted, which would allow you to take 2 power types. When you take Sewer Powers, you've got to pick one of them. Eidetic Memory, where you can add +2 to your common knowledge rolls, and on smart checks to remember something you saw. Old Timer, which is self-explanatory. Red Tape, you know a way around administration. You get 5 additional equipment points before each mission. But if you make a habit of not returning your equipment or bringing it back destroyed, you could temporarily lose the edge's benefit. I feel like that's specifically calling out Bond. And improved Red Tape, which lets you take the Red Tape edge and give you 5 more for a total of 10 extra equipment points. Which means if you took both of those, you would have 20 equipment points to go with, 10 as the base, and then 10 more if you took that. But you'd have to be a veteran to take improved Red Tape. So let me let me go back to the advancement thing. So, veteran is the third one. So, actually, yeah, you would have 30 points to spend. Oh.
So much gear.
And for combat edges, we have blind fighting, which is exactly what it sounds like. Close quarters battle. So it's not just being good at hand to hand. It's mainly being good about fighting in very close quarters with things like submachine guns, shotguns, and assault rifles. You can fire in melee without being penalized, and you don't get penalized when using your firearms as improv weapons. It doesn't stack with improvisational fighter. Then when it comes to improved CQB, the innocent bystander rule only applies if the character rolls a critical failure when firing into melee. You also don't become vulnerable when attacking a non-adjacent target with a ranged attack while in melee. But we have professional edges. So Demolitionist, for those who want to blow things up. You get +2 to repair rolls when you use explosives and when trying to disarm bombs and mines. I appreciate that Demolitionist means you're not only good at blowing things up, you're good at making things not blow up.
Yeah.
Let's see, then Hacker, +2 to hacking rolls. Master of Disguise. You +2 to performance when disguising, provided you had time to prepare the disguise in advance. You can switch to the new identity in just one round. Again, calling back to that whole under 30 seconds rule. Then with social edges, you have alternate identity. You have a whole alternate identity that you can assume anytime. If this identity is busted, you need 2d6 days to build a new one. This is essentially cover ID. There's a side note. The Spear already provides false identities for operatives during a mission, but this edge can come in handy if your character's cover is blown. And then weird edges. Mind Shield. You possess power protection against telepathic powers, whether natural or via technology. You gain +2 to any roll to resist mind-based powers, and you can choose to not resist beneficial mind powers, such as telepathic communication, etc. Also grants you +2 protection against mental attacks. So I guess you could say Mind Shield is akin to the. I was gonna say it's akin to the blanks, but it's just if you're a psychic, you probably know about mental fuckery. And the last part in here is the quick archetypes.
Now, we won't be going over these, but I do like we've got a nice list. It gives you a good idea of kind of how they intended characters to get built. Something I've always enjoyed.
A big benefit of this is that it's very, very easy to make characters in Savage Worlds quickly. And a lot of times when we see quick sample characters in games, you get maybe 5 if you're lucky. Sometimes you only get 1. But here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1 for each of the archetypes that we saw earlier in the chapter.
A little farther down, you do have like full details on example characters.
Yeah.
And not just the quick archetypes, which is also nice.
And
all the kind of details, examples, and guidance you would want, you have here.
Pretty much. And each of them having a nice little dossier like setup. In fact, if I remember that there was one site that could take a photo and make it look like it was a spy dossier. If I'm running Titan Effect, I may use that. Just have the opening set up of someone going through the different dossiers. If you want another example of that, consider the teaser trailer for what was known at the time as Overstrike. when it finally came out, it was Fuse, and it kind of sucked because they decided to take themselves serious. And I think Insomniac kind of knew it. But that covers the introduction and character creation. So, I know this is your first introduction to Savage Worlds, but what are you thinking so far?
Well, so far, I think it's quite well organized. Easy to follow setup with the dice, just like add your skill and stat dice. Something we've seen before. Good range of options just from this book, and while I haven't read through the Savage Worlds core book, I imagine there's a good amount more skills and edges that we haven't covered here.
Yes.
It's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in to see where it goes from here and how the psychic powers work and all that.
Yeah.
So it's got my interest, and it's easy to understand and work with so far.
There is one game that was I think it was brought up in the inspirations in the Year Zero version that wasn't in here. I think that is a perk that is so on the nose it's not even funny. Do you remember PsyOps: The Mindgate Conspiracy?
I don't.
It was a third-person shooter during the early 2000s. I think Midway published it, because Midway would publish anything that moves around that time because of how desperate they were to recoup, because they had relied on the arcades as their main bank, but arcades were on the decline in the 2000s. So they were in full-on panic mode, and they wouldn't stop being in panic mode for years until they went belly up. But even if you just look at some cursory screenshots of PsyOps, I think you'll see why I say it's a perfect fit here. And even though it's dealing with aliens, I also think the XCOM games and games like it are a natural inspirational fit. Although Savage Worlds is going to be a lot more fair with its RNG than XCOM is. No, I'm not letting that go. I will forever slander the RNG bullshit of XCOM. Because 99% chance to hit, point blank
Bullshit.
range, and you still miss.
Multiple times in a row.
Yeah. And that's not even getting into the Longmore mod, which has broken people. I will not run the Longmore mod. Not unless I am being sufficiently paid. But with that said, I know this was a short one. This is gonna be around an hour when all's said and done. We will be getting into the gear section next time, and I'm actually glad that Gear's not using a dollar amount or something like that, but instead a refillable point setup.
A loadout, effectively.
Yeah, because it gives more reason for experimentation. So we'll be diving into that on the 16th.
And I don't think a dollar thing would really make much sense considering the setup we've got so far.
Yeah, you're working for a spy.
Loadout makes way more sense here.
Plus some. I'd imagine that working for a spy organization, if you're spending money on the side, that money's going to be tracked. In case you need to answer some very pointed questions about why you were spending so much money on something. Because, well, imagine if somebody was spending a good amount of their pay on say getting a Lotus. That would raise a few questions, because not just everybody is going to have a Lotus. But that's just one case. Now, that being said, tune in tomorrow as Neff and I go into Tokyo Conception and give our final thoughts on it. And in the aftermath, I'm gonna have to start prepping for doing a short vid comparing both it and Devil City Tokyo, because by this time next week, I will be finished with both of them. It's just not going to be at the exact time that I had initially planned. And I see Hydra saying they better have a damn good accountant if they've been spending money like that. I think is what he meant. I don't know. I've worked with good accountants. I've worked with not so good accountants. So you take what you can get. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Sin